Thank you for joining. Let's say you blast out an email to a small list of only 200 people. If we work with the bare minimum and we see you get fined $200 per email, let's do some math. 200 emails at $200 per, that's a $40,000 email blast if you don't follow the rules. Now, you might be thinking, what are the chances it's going to be me? Well, some realtor somewhere in this beautiful country of ours will be made an example of, because here's how easy it is. All someone has to do is click and send to that email address, and now you're the example. And not only is there one governing body, there's in fact three. The CRTC, the realtor's best friend, the Competition Bureau, and the Privacy Commissioner. They analyze at three levels to see if an action complies or not. Hi, I'm David Greenspan. Not a lawyer, I'm a marketer. And I'm also a millennial, the connected generation. E-talk, e-walk, e-sleep, e-mail, but I'm on overload, e-overload. And most people are these days. That said, we love our social media, so please make sure to like our Kids Business page on Facebook for some awesome social media content, and subscribe to Mindshare 101 on YouTube. You'll find some very short, thought-provoking, and funny videos that you can enjoy over a morning coffee or any time at all, just not during this webinar. Okay, I'm going to try and be as clear as quick as possible today. So if you don't have a way to take notes, you should grab that computer or that pen and paper right now. And for any questions, please hold them until the end, where I will be hosting a live Q&A. For sure you've heard about it. As of July 1st, 2017, less than 30 days from now, sending email to someone without first having permission is now illegal. This is a game changer. This is not a feel-good or a nice-to-have or a business standard. It's the law. CASL, short for Canada Anti-Spam Legislation, is in place to control CEMs, and it establishes rules and guidelines that we have to follow. And if we don't follow those rules, because it's the law, we can get fined anywhere between $200 to $1 million as individuals, or $200 to $10 million as businesses if we break that law. So, let's take the next few minutes to define the process, review the rules, talk about marketing in the safe zone, things you should do and things you shouldn't do, and we'll review the takeaways. So, let's have a look at some of the definitions under CASL. Sender, that's you. It could be you sending it, and or it can be a company sending it on your behalf. And that doesn't matter if they're located in Canada or overseas. You are defined as the sender, always. And therefore, there is no loophole to hiring an offshore firm to help send your CEMs. Recipient, that's them, the people that you are sending your CEMs to. Anyone on the other end of an electronic message from you. CEM, a commercial electronic message. Could be email, text message, or even social media. If it's electronic, it falls in this category. Anytime you have your website address or even your banner with your contact info in there, or even if you say, I'm never too busy for your referrals, it's all looked at as a promotion of your business and therefore falls under the category of a commercial activity, therefore a CEM. A charitable event, although it can fall under an exemption, which we will discuss further in a few moments, if you include any of the website, banner, or your business-related messaging and branding, then this type of message would still fall under a CEM, as you cannot hide your business within a charitable message and expect to be exempt. You have included your business in the message. Again, it is therefore commercial. Even an email that's personal to a family member, if it includes any sort of business info, then it's considered a CEM. Bottom line, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, and looks like a duck, it's most probably a duck. If your message contains anything that can be seen as a benefit to your overall business brand image, it is considered a CEM and legislated by the new CASL. So just to be clear one more time, because this is very important, the information contained within a CEM determines if the message is a CEM. If the content of the message, hyperlinks in the message to other content, or the contact information in the message would cause a reasonable person to conclude that the purpose of the message, or one of its purposes, is to encourage participation in a commercial activity, then the message is a CEM. Now, as I mentioned, there are some exemptions. Responses to commercial inquiries, family or personal communications, internal business communications, and legal communications. Let's drill down on those. A response to a commercial inquiry. If you have a property listed and someone sends you an email requesting more info, implied consent has technically just been granted, and you can now communicate electronically with this person for the course of the next 6 months. At that point, if you want to continue communicating electronically, then you need to obtain express consent. Family or personal communications. Reality is that if your message contains anything commercial within it, then it falls under a CEM. But would your family and friends ever actually complain about it? Question mark. Internal business communications. Your broker, manager, front desk staff can communicate with you all day and all night via electronic messaging, as it has nothing, or as it has to do with your business, but they cannot, however, just add your email address to another list unless for internal business purposes. So again, your office, they can continue to send you emails back and forth. You can do all that. But if it's them sending it to a third-party supplier and having that supplier spam you, that's not allowed. Finally, legal communications. Sending standard business forms to clients, your office, or even your lawyers. That is allowed. Also, and mentioned before, charitable messaging. Any company sending messages 100% specifically for charity, and that is the only purpose of the message. There are no hidden messages or other businesses being promoted in any way. They're allowed. And finally, you have to expect this one, political emails from our beloved politicians. Those are also exempt, of course. So, how does this apply to social media? Well, there's a ton of gray area around it, because being friends with someone on social media implies consent, because one of you initiated the request and the other accepted. You send a friend request to somebody, you click add friend, they accept, there is consent. Remember, this all has to do with mass messages to an audience who does not want it or has not consented to it. Social media is essentially a consented audience. And with computer programs, which I just personally do not see this really affecting you guys as realtors, mortgage brokers, because you're not out there, that I know of, installing programs on people's computers. So that begs the question about cookies. Now, I don't mean chocolate chip cookies. We're talking about the cookies that are planted from websites that follow you around and everything else. Legislation states that this will all be dependent on your computer's browser settings. And so if you accept cookies, then you have, in fact, provided consent. So again, a website places a cookie that follows you around to all the different other websites you go to. You see banner ads, you see all sorts of marketing from that place you were at last time. That's a cookie. If you've accepted cookies within the browser settings, you've essentially given consent. So really what they mean, they're going after the massive phishing servers, like the big viruses, and they're trying to regulate these guys. They've got penalties that can be handed down to those groups. In fact, the very first penalty handed down was to a botnet company who infected computers all over the world. So just again, one of these spam sort of phishing virus type of servers that are set up by some company somewhere. That's what they're really trying to control. It's really focused on those people or those entities. So, can you still market with email? Of course you can. You need to follow certain guidelines, and you need to have consent. Each and every CEM must include the following information. Mark this stuff down. It must clearly identify who the sender is. So your full name must be in the message. Again, whether it's sent by a third-party company on your behalf or it's sent by you, your full name must be in the message. You must have an easy-to-use, free unsubscribe function. And FYI, if you're doing this manually, you have 10 days from when someone unsubscribes to actually officially remove them from your list. So again, if you've got a third-party company that is a third party that is sending out your emails for you, as long as they've got the unsubscribe mechanism and they're automatically removing people, then it works. If you're doing this on your own, you can at the bottom say if you don't want these emails, reply back and say stop the emails. You can put a link, but if you're controlling this yourself, you have a maximum of 10 days to take that person off the list. The third mandatory requirement is you must include your physical mailing address. You send an email, have your physical mailing address on there. When it comes to text messaging and social media, again, a lot of gray area about that within the legislation. So what I'm going to advise you from all the reading that I've done is that you must include your physical mailing address. That is a mandatory requirement. However, it's really going to be pertinent to email. And the fourth, you also must have one of either your email, phone number, or website address included in the message as well. So again, we need to have your full name. We need to have a free, easy-to-use unsubscribe mechanism. You must include your physical mailing address. And you have to have either one of your email, phone number, or website address. Here's an example of how a compliant email looks. This is a visual of an email newsletter that you can send out to your clients through Loop CRM using the KITS marketing tools. You can clearly see the sender's name in both the email address field as well as within the banner. You can see the sender's mailing address along with additional contact info, which in this case includes an email address and social media links. And the compliant unsubscribe mechanism, making it simple and easy for anyone to opt out at any time, is down below in that fine print. Remember, for your messages to be compliant, it must include those four features. Now, there are two forms of consent. I hope you're writing this stuff down. Implied and express. In either form, keep in mind that the onus will always be on you to prove prior consent. Implied consent can be broken down a few different ways, and here are some examples. Business dealings. If you've had a business relationship, a purchase, a sale, or a lease transaction in the last 2 years, or a contract did exist in the last 2 years, and you have communicated electronically in that time with the recipient, then you have implied consent for 2 years. Inquiries, as mentioned earlier. If you get an inquiry electronically pertaining to business, you have 6 months to continue the communication under implied consent. Disclosure of address, and this one's a tricky one. Pay attention to this one. An example would be that you're at an event. Someone hands you a business card which includes contact info and an email address and specifically says, be in touch with me. Then you do have implied consent. But a rule of thumb would be to clearly document how and when you got consent. Alternatively, you're at the same event and the same passing back and forth of business cards happens, but the person doesn't say, be in touch with me, then you can't just assume you have consent, and therefore can't just add this person to a list. It'll be good practice from now on to document how you got consent and when, in the case that you ever need to rely on the proof. And under implied consent, the timelines must be adhered to. The second form of consent is express consent. This is much simpler and clearer than implied. This could be a standard form or a very clearly written email about the fact that you are looking to get express consent. In turn, if the recipient does grant consent, the message and reply is also very clear that they are in fact granting you express consent. Again, in both cases, it's very important to track how you received consent, when you received it, and what type of consent you received. If I'm doing a presentation and I get a business card from somebody, I will pose the question, do I have your express consent? And if the person sort of shrugs it off, looks at me funny and says, yeah, of course, I actually write it down on the back of the business card, where I was, the date, when, so I can track that. I know. Some of you are rolling your eyes right now going, really? I've got to do all that? And I'm going to tell you, you can do what you want, but that's the way to keep yourself safe. Track it. We know paper trails come in handy when needed. That's the idea. You're just trying to track it. Now, as express consent is the better of the two forms to obtain, the CASL legislation also lays out inclusions for how we make the request and what we include in the message of request. The following items are a must when requesting express consent. So when you're going to go in and ask somebody, here's what you need. Again, your name, the person seeking consent's name. So if you're the sender, you're the one that's seeking consent, you have to have your name in there, must be included in the message. The mailing address, again, the sender, you, and also one of either email, telephone number, or website URL. The purpose of why you are asking for consent. I'd like to send you my newsletter. For example, you need to let them know that you would like to continue sending them your e-newsletter or market updates. You need to share the why. And finally, a statement clearly letting them know that they can opt out at any time, therefore putting the onus on them. If you don't already have implied consent with this person, then you can obtain express either orally or in writing. But remember again, the onus is always on you to show proof if ever your day in court comes. Let me just clarify that last point. I said if you don't already have implied consent with this person, if you don't already have it, and we just reviewed a few ways to get implied, then you can't use email to go and ask for express. You need to actually do it in writing or in person, but you can't do it electronically. Again, the onus is on you to show proof if your day in court ever comes. And in fact, for these well-known companies, their day in court has already come. Formally, the legislation calls it an administrative fee. We call it a fine. Or they got nailed. But here's Kellogg's. Kellogg's got nailed for $60,000. If anybody's ever heard of the online dating site, Plenty of Fish, they got nailed for $48,000. Porter Airlines here in Toronto, downtown Toronto, they got nailed for $150,000. And Rogers got nailed for $200,000. If you do not have express or implied consent with an individual, as of July 1st, you can no longer communicate electronically with those contacts. If you do continue to connect without consent, fines can be from $200,000 to $1 million for individuals, or again for a business from $200,000 to $10 million. So that math we did before of a $40,000 email blast from you, ouch. Get consent first, and we're going to give you some tips on what to do next. Let's review the two types one more time. And this is a main factor for you going forward in business with the new CASL. Express consent. It's clearly defined. It does not expire, but make sure to track the date it's obtained. Implied consent, on the other hand, does expire. And so tracking how you got it, when you got it, and when it expires is essential. It can be attained through prior business dealings, relationships or contracts in the past 2 years, inquiries in the past 6 months, obvious disclosures of address, and advertisements clearly stating to email them. Here's another example of the new Kit's e-newsletter feature within Loop CRM that helps you stay compliant and on top of your email list. We provide you fields to enter the contact's full name. You can put in different information from phone numbers and categorizing, having salutation. Because as it's unique to Kits, we always personalize everything we do for you and their email address. The compliance part allows you to track the date consent was received, the type of consent you received, and even take notes, so you actually have some background history of how you got this. So many of you are probably thinking, wow, this is a lot to take in and a lot to be on top of. And some of you may even think, who cares? It's not going to affect me. For those of you thinking that, you are very wrong. Real estate will be a major industry that they will have their eyes on, and one of you will be made an example of, as they usually do. So what to do? Well, here's a suggestion. Review your existing contact list to see who you do and do not have email addresses for. Then, backcheck, confirm, and document the last time you had electronic communication with the recipient, as long as it was prior to July 1st, 2014. You have implied consent with these people and can therefore continue to communicate electronically with them for the next 23 days. Now, I said prior to July 2014. We're in 2017. Remember that the legislation kicked in July 1st, 2014. They gave us a 3-year, what they call the grandfather period, to kind of make mistakes and not really get nailed. Some of the big companies got nailed, but us little people, well, they gave us a little time to get used to this. So again, you're trying to backtrack and make sure that prior to the legislation kicking in, even for the initial period of July 1st, 2014, that you've had implied consent with these people. You've communicated electronically. So sometime between right after we wrap this webinar and prior to July 1st, 2017, you must email them again and request express consent. Otherwise, come July 1st, 2017, you can no longer keep in touch with these people by means of a CEM. If they do not reply / grant you express consent, you must cease to communicate electronically with that contact. For anyone you do not have an email address for, you can ask for it, but you must do it orally or in writing. And again, remember that the onus is on you to prove when you received the consent and how. So, is this the end to spam? No. We're still going to continue to get all sorts of unwanted messaging. This legislation is for Canada only. So offshore companies will still be filling our inboxes with junk. However, keep in mind, if they're sending on your behalf, then you are still the sender, and therefore you are the one liable. Companies who do business in Canada but may be known as a U.S. company, they will also be subject to the new legislation. Any person or any business operating within Canada is subject to this. But spam will never fully disappear, and as of July 1st, Canada now has the strictest electronic messaging legislation in the world. So what about marketing by email? Is it the end of that for you? Yes and no. Email has been arguable as an effective form of marketing communication over the past few years. Due to the significant increase in spam, our mail servers have become more and more effective at limiting the amount of junk mail we all get every day. And therefore, a lot of messages never even make it to the intended recipient. I mean, they say we see over 150 emails a day. I think I see a heck of a lot more than that, of which 50% of it is spam. Now, this whole thing has led us to put a huge, heavy emphasis on analytics. How many people open, read our email, etc. So we're looking at the numbers. Oh, look, they opened it, or oh, they saw it, or oh, it was sent. The reality, I can hit mark as read on my smartphone, And it will then relay the message to the person watching their analytics. And it'll show you that I read the message, which in reality, I may not have even looked at the subject line, never mind the whole message, but you believe I did. And you get excited about the success of your email campaign. Now we put too much onus on there. Remember, technology can pull the best tricks in the book, and analytics are just one of the many. Unfortunately, we rely too heavily on them and spend a lot of money implementing, but possibly not seeing the returns in actual dollars, which we ultimately want. All that being said, email can, yes, still be very effective, but if used properly as part of a cross-channel marketing strategy. For example, like Kit's offers. Email is just one tool, not the only tool. Cross-channel is the most strategic way of making any of your marketing actually work for you. With all the media out there these days, it's all about using tools together in order to get your message across to your audience. What cross-channel means is exactly what you see here. Combining a CRM as your central hub, including your calendar and contact list, and ensuring it is connected to your marketing. It has to be mobile. You want to have at least 150 to 350 people on your A list, receiving your A list type of marketing. Have another chunk of people who you've met at the open houses, anywhere else, and as well, those A-listers. Again, you can email them. Social media, you want to be present, and this is a whole other strategy we're going to do another webinar on. The drip marketing you do for prospects. Ask for consent at open houses. If you have a farm area, these people may provide you with email addresses. Be sure to ask the question about consent. The idea is to combine your e-strategy to have support with other methods of connecting with people. Don't let this email thing scare you. Be sure to stay compliant, and remember that ultimately your goal is to build mindshare. So let's review. You have 2 years after a sale contract to communicate electronically with that recipient. It falls under implied consent. You have 6 months to communicate electronically with the recipient if they inquire with you about your business. Again, falling under implied consent. Express consent can be obtained in writing or oral, but remember, oral will not be reliable in court, so track it. You should always track how you got consent, what type of consent, when you got it, and when it expires if it's implied consent. Email, if used properly as part of an overall cross-channel marketing strategy, can still remain an effective form of marketing communication. And lastly, remember, all CEMs need to include the following information at all times: the sender's name, mailing address, and either phone, email, or web address, and a free, easy-to-use, unsubscribe mechanism. Our goal today was to deliver an easy-to-understand review of the new Canada anti-spam legislation. We have simply provided you with some opinions and our own interpretation of the new law. This is a list of several, but not all, of the different publications we read through and used to assist us in developing today's presentation. If anyone has any questions, you can type them into the webinar dashboard on your screen. I will do my best to read all questions out loud, and then we'll try and answer them for everyone to listen into. At this time, we open the floor to everybody for a question and answer period. Please bear with me. As I go through this, I am going to be reading through, looking at the screen, reading questions out loud, and then doing the answer. So let's get started. To anybody who asked about receiving a copy of the recording, we will be creating a recorded copy of this if it did record today. Otherwise, we will be doing a re-record. It will be posted on our YouTube channel, Mindshare 101. So if everybody's looking at their screen there, mark that down. Go to our YouTube channel, please, and thank you whenever you got time. Subscribe to the channel. The recording will be posted pretty shortly. We don't know if it'll be today, this evening, tomorrow, but it'll be posted very, very quickly. And again, thank you everybody for being present with us. Next question. So we had a question here. Can we review the differences in requirements from business to consumer and business to business? So one thing that we mentioned there is when you're sending notes, emails, let's call it, CEMs, back and forth to people that you know that are in your line of business based on a specific transaction, that is allowed. So if you're going to communicate back and forth with your lawyer, you're going to communicate back and forth with property managers, mortgage brokers, again, that is allowed. You've essentially got consent there because you're working on a transaction. So again, you are allowed to do that. Let's flip that one around. Let's say you've got a big email list. Let's say, I don't know, I'm a lawyer, which I'm not. Let's say I'm a lawyer and I'm on your list. You're not communicating with me on a transaction. I'm just part of your list. Are you allowed to send it to me without consent? No. So because that's a marketing message, a commercial electronic message, you need consent. Flip side, we're working on a business deal together. You've got consent because you're allowed to communicate back and forth. There's a gray area one. Great question. If a realtor is putting a message on their personal social media page looking for buyers or properties for buyers, your question and sort of statement, you are assuming they are breaking the rules. I'm going to correct you and sort of also tell you there's a little bit of gray area there. So when we look at social media and we assume that if it's your personal page, I'm either there because I've accepted a friend request or somehow Facebook's algorithm has just popped your page up on my wall. So if Facebook's put it up there, you're not the one spamming me. If we're friends and you put it up on your wall, it's still not considered spam. So the reality is, guys, when you're working with your personal page or your business page and you do post something on that page, any of us who do see it, technically under the legislation, we have consented to be friends or to connect somehow on that platform. Therefore, you have consent. So again, to clarify that one, yes, you're allowed to promote your listings on there. Now, I'm going to tell you, and we'll do a separate webinar on this, I do not like, and this is not just me, but this is kind of social media 101, 80-20 rule, 80% social, 20% business. Just quick note to that one, don't bombard people's walls on Facebook with all your business stuff all the time. The reason we're there is for social, it's not for business. If every so often you drop something in there because you want to let people know, hey, look how busy I am, I think that's great. That being said, again, we're there for social. So remember to use that strategically. We will do another webinar on this one. So great question here. Just to be clear, if I have been communicating with customers and clients prior to July 1st, 2017, I can continue to communicate with them for up to 3 years after July 1st. Is that correct? No. Here's the way this works. Rewind back to 2014 when the legislation first came in. This is where we had that 3-year grandfather period. Let's now take that 3-year grandfather period, forget about it. Literally come July 1st, 2017, like 23 days from now, this thing kicks in full swing. So the idea now becomes, if you had consent to talk to me, even under implied consent, now, before 2014, today, whatever, you want to at some point get expressed because the implied has that expiry date. So again, you want to get express consent at all times. Once you get express, it is basically open for infinity. It is up to the recipient to unsubscribe at that time. Guys, as I'm reading these questions and answers, if you feel that the answer didn't come across or it wasn't clear enough, please feel free to post the question again or maybe ask it a different way or anything you're looking for. I am literally just going from the top to the bottom, and I'll continue going as long as you guys need me here. There's a good one. So referrals. What happens if you've got a client named Judy and Judy refers you to Bob? Are you allowed to connect with Bob? Well, again, the idea would be this. How did Judy connect you to? Did she give you his email? Did she give you his phone number? Did she email you and CC him? Were you included there? The idea would be that essentially we're going to assume that Judy already knows Bob, so there's a little bit of consent there, and the fact that she's making the introduction, we're going to take sort of an assumption that we're okay with that. Now, let's clarify this. You want to get in touch with this person, Bob, because there's a potential deal there. Great. If Bob gets put onto your big email list without ever talking to him, then no, you're not allowed to do that. But if you just go back once, let's say you do a reply all because this was an email, like it initiated by email, and you do a reply all. You go back to Bob, you're okay. You're communicating with him. And I'll give you an example on my end. When I get a client of mine, say, Dave, connect with so-and-so, I'm going to typically, if they haven't said it to me in an email, or maybe they sent me an email but they didn't include this person's information, I'm going to go back to the person who sent it to me and say, do they know I'm getting in touch? I'm essentially just going to try to lay those little cookie crumbs along the line that give me permission to be in touch. But again, remember, we're not spamming anybody. This is me just following up on a lead. So that is totally cool. You are allowed to do that. Just remember, don't take Bob's email and just randomly put him into your database and start spamming them without any consent or ever speaking with them. That you can't do. Sharing things on Facebook. Again, coming back to social, great questions here, guys. Can you share a fellow agent's listing? Absolutely. Remember, again, social media is considered a consented platform, so you are allowed to take stuff and share it out there. Again, just paying attention to how often you're doing these things. It's not more legislation, it's more just social media strategy. But yes, you can go ahead and share that out. Can you have all of the necessary information in your banner, or does it need to be in the body of the email? It doesn't matter where it is as long as it's there. So if I can see your full name, I can see your mailing address, one of either the web, the email, the phone number, and the unsubscribe mechanism wouldn't be in your banner, but the idea being I can see those mandatory requirements. They are there. That's the idea. The example I showed you guys of a KITS e-newsletter, again, it's one example of, it's a clean way of doing it. But if you've got, let's say, your banner created by a designer, and in there you've got your full name, you got contact info, you got the mailing address, you're good. Just make sure you put the unsubscribe somewhere so that, again, it's there. We got to make sure we give people the ability to unsubscribe at all times. And by the way, on the unsubscribe, when I said before free, easy to use, you cannot have it where you've got a little checkbox that says to somebody, you must uncheck this box if you wish to stop receiving emails. You've got to make it easy. It's got to be clear. People need to understand what's going on. So if I click that button, it stops? Yes. Okay, that's cool. But not go to this web page, go here, go there, and start to make it convoluted for people. You can't do that. It's got to be really, really simple. Are hyperlinks that populate after visiting certain sites part of this regulation? I'm not quite sure I understand that question. When you go to a website and you've got, well, we're going to call it again, I'm going to come back to kind of the idea of the cookies. So now you've gone to a website, abc.com, whatever. You're there, now you leave there, you go to a different site, or you close everything off, and later on down the road, today or tomorrow, you go back to the web, and all of a sudden abc.com has banner ads running. That's kind of the idea behind cookies, and that's how they get those ads going. You've essentially, because your browser settings said, yes, I accept cookies, and therefore I'll let this stuff follow me around. If I didn't answer that one properly, Nikki, please don't hesitate to pose that one again in a different way. Perfect. That fell right in there. So if people have allowed cookies, then they have consented to tagging. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, essentially, what the legislation states. Having read through it, and so you know the whole idea of like computer programming and social media, that all kicked in about a year after the 2014 stuff. So it was a little bit fresher, but I mean, again, looking at it, reading up on it, a lot of that is yes. You've said Yeah, I'm good with it. You can follow me because of your browser settings. So if anybody out there hates the retargeting and the tagging and the marketing and all that stuff, go deal with your browser settings, and that's going to actually negate the consent that was provided. Okay, good question, and this is a good one, a good opportunity to clarify. Question, please confirm, before July 1st, 2017, you can send an email marketing piece to get consent. Yes and no. Huh? Well, did you have implied consent with this person? If yes, yeah, you can use email. Did you have implied consent with this person? No. Well, then no, you cannot use email. You have to actually call these people. Go see these people. Write them a letter. The legislation states you cannot use electronic messaging to ask that question. Again, that's only if you have never communicated electronically with these people. If you have, you've essentially you've essentially got what's called implied consent until July 1st, 2017. So again, yes, you've communicated. Yes, you can send it. No, you've never communicated electronically. Then you got to find another way to do it. Guys, remember something too as I'm going through this. The onus is on the recipient, for lack of better words, to rat you out. It's on them to go to that government website, click the link, send your email, and put you on the list. And even there, the legislation, the bodies that are governing, they're going to be looking at this and trying to figure out, are you some, big spammer and we've got to get you under control? Are you spamming thousands upon thousands of addresses daily, weekly, monthly? Are you one of these people that's just really violating? Or was this just somebody who maybe had a bad bowl of cereal that morning and decided to send an email to the government saying, you're a spammer? So again, it's going to be on them to do this. Okay. Are you able to tell us easily what the difference is in 2017 from 2014? In 2014, we had 3 years up until this, July 1st, 2017. We had 3 years to make mistakes. So when I talked about that grandfather clause, essentially they said, like if you mess up, like we're going to kind of turn a blind eye, but we're prepping you. So the July 1st, 2014 deadline was called, let's say, announcement. Let's say it's stage 1 of kicking this thing into gear to get people ready for it, and making sure that by July 1st, 2017, people were educated, people were prepared, people were organized and systematized. Come July 1st, 2017, it's now official. Like it's in stone. If you mess up, you might go on that list, and now there's no like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. No. We gave you 3 years to mess up. You should have taken those 3 years and did it. We're now 23 days out, or we're now live and past July 1st, 2017, and now you're asking for forgiveness? Sorry, we gave you 3 years to learn about that. So that's really your big difference between the two periods. This thing was official back in 2014. They wanted to give everybody time to get prepared. Yes, you did hear that wrong. So can you clarify what you meant when you said we cannot email people for express consent if we have already got implied consent? Or did I hear this wrong? Yes, you heard wrong. If you have implied, you can email people. Yes, you are allowed to email people. Again, we've got implied consent. Even though it's got an expiry date, essentially consent is there. So can you use electronic methods? Absolutely. The flip side is you've never had implied. Well, now you got to find another way to connect first to be able to then start to create this consent. So more of a statement here, but I believe a question, and sort of asking like, is this okay? Our office administrators send out thank you for listing with us and a before you move document to buyers. If I'm sort of seeing the question there, is the follow-up to that question kind of like, is that allowed? Again, the office administrator is essentially doing this on your behalf to that contact. If you're if you're referenced in that email to the recipient, so your name is referenced, however, your administrator is sending it, and the recipient is seeing that you're there, again, remember, you're the sender, even though the administrator pressed the button, and the recipient is the person on the other end. Now, let's say in that same scenario, or little twist to that, your administrator sending it, you're not referenced absolutely anywhere, then at that point, again, the administrator, that email address, should technically have consent. Now, I'm going to say, based on my understanding of the legislation, the fact that this recipient, let's say your client, is a client of yours, aka the office's, well, then your administrator is technically allowed to send that communication. Again, they just want to ensure, to keep their butts safe, that they have the 4 mandatory requirements. Good one. So if somebody gives you a business card and does say contact me, what kind of expiry do you have on that? What I would be doing right at that moment, guys, instead of looking for the implied and going, do I have 6 months or 2 years on that? I'm jumping right out of the gate and going, hey, do I have your express consent? And again, most people are just going to kind of look at you, shrug their shoulders, and be like, yeah, no problem. Done. So again, if you're at an event and somebody gives you that card and does say, like, be in touch, take the second. Just, do I have your express consent? For the amount of times I've asked that question, I'm sure there's many of you on this call who I've posed that question to. Many of you who probably don't even remember hearing it from me, but it was asked. And when I ask it, I document it. And again, I was on the call at such and such a time, on such and such a date. And, they said, yeah, email me. And I said, do I have express? And they said, yeah, done. Here's the idea. It's a paper trail, right? So when we look back at that, let's say it's a month, a week, a year, whatever it is, and then for God forbid, we're in court. Well, I'm going to be bringing documentation to show when we were on the call, how I asked, what I asked. You're going to be standing there going, no, I don't have any of that stuff. Because of course you don't. Why would you track when you gave me express consent? You're not thinking that way. But I, the guy that could potentially get in trouble by using that, I'm thinking that way. So again, strategically, when you're at that event or anywhere and somebody hands a business card and says, yeah, connect with me, or even if they don't say connect with me, like take the second, ask the question. Some people won't even say connect with me. They'll just give you a card and maybe assume you know to connect with them. Take that second. Hey, do I have your express consent to send by email? Oh, yeah, no problem. Done. Right on the back of the card, move on. What if we receive any such email or spam? Can we impose a lawsuit on them? Here's the thing. The governing bodies are really going to have a look at, again, this individual. How many times have they been reported? Have they ever been reported? They're going to be looking for a whole bunch of background information to understand, what was the reason or what has this person's track record been being a spammer. At the same time, when you go to that government site, they're going to ask for your information. They want to know who you are. They want to know why this is a problem. They want to know if you've actually asked these people to stop before. So guys, this is not as easy as, you didn't like the way some other realtor walked into your open house with another agent or whatever and did a showing and left the place a mess. Like, you can just go ahead and like start getting them in trouble on stuff. No, it doesn't work like that. You can't just go out on like a tangent with people and say, oh, I got an easy way to get somebody in trouble. No. They're going to look for a lot of your info so they know who you are and why you're doing this. And they're going to look back to this other person's info and try to understand what their history and track record of doing this is. So just, when I say that like the Competition Bureau is going to come after you guys, we all know the Competition Bureau sort of stories over the past number of years with the MLS boards and all that other stuff. Just real estate's a industry that they're always focused on. And because there's so much marketing, and although there's a lot of guidelines and rules on how we're supposed to do this stuff, the reality being like we're all our own little business, or you're all your own little businesses. You kind of do your own thing, your own branding, your own marketing, your own everything else. So because you're all, your own little business, and there's so many of you, they're going to focus their attention on it in some way, shape, or form. So just be careful with what you do and how you do it, but no, you cannot just wildcat and go and just start, kind of handing down lawsuits to people. It's not that easy. It's just easy to sort of track it. Okay, next question. So this is, again, someone does a statement, but can do biz-to-biz marketing of the recipient's email address, the mortgage broker's email address, the property manager's email address is available publicly without a disclaimer saying they do not want to receive unsolicited messages. This means that realtors can have marketing messages sent to them if their email address is publicly available. So again, I would say to you guys this, a lot of you guys have your email address publicly available on your website, a lot of you, not all of you. It does not give anybody the right to go to your website, grab that, and stick you on an email list. And that's what the legislation is saying. Now, again, remember, this is regulated within our borders of Canada. Whether it's a third party sending from offshore or not, again, it's regulated here. So if a company from the States who's operating in the States and just decides to start scraping websites up here and grabs your email address, yeah, you're going to be getting spam. Canada is trying to regulate Canadians. And so just because the address is there, the legislation does state that if it doesn't say, email me till the cows come home, you can't just grab it and do it. Remember, guys, business is about relationships. Build the relationship. Don't be scared to get on the phone and call somebody. Don't hesitate to just ask the question. Call them up and let them know, hey, I'm sending you something. I got your email. Is it okay that I send you? Do I have your express consent? This is you covering your butt. So again, just because the address is there, no, you cannot. I'll give you another example. As you guys know, I'm in the marketing world for your business. I can't just walk into a coffee shop, grab the real estate books off of the little stand in the vestibule there, and start, scraping email addresses and add you to my database. I'm not allowed to do that under this legislation. So that works the same if you find it on the web, if you find it somewhere else. It's all the same type of idea. Do you have a message for unsubscribe that we can use right away? Yes. If you are a KITS member on this call right now, you have this set up for you immediately. It's there. It's been there for some time now. Within your KITS e-news marketing feature, which is essentially just a big email engine, we write a newsletter for you once a month. You got all sorts of different content in there. You can put your own content. You can use our content. You can mix and match. You can upload pictures and stuff. But it automatically brings in your branding. It automatically brings in your mandatory requirements. It automatically has the unsubscribe feature, and it automatically unsubscribes people. If you do not have a KIT subscription, I encourage you all to get one. What about advertising a business post on a group that I belong to? Again, this is that fine line. Are we advertising? Are we boosting a post? Are we sponsoring a post? Or are we just kind of taking, let's say, a listing that we've got and sharing it out to a group? Well, let's think about this. Did you get accepted to the group? If you're nodding your head yes, you've essentially had consent to be able to partake in that group. If the other people in that group had to get accepted, well, they as well are now consenting. Let's say that there's those public groups you're allowed to just join on your own and the administrator doesn't have to accept you, and you go and put an ad out there. The reality, they've set their settings to allow that, and therefore they've created some form of consent. So yes, you are allowed to share that stuff out. Does CASL apply to Facebook advertising? Example, loading an email list to create an audience. Does CASL apply to Facebook advertising? So that's the first part of the question. There are, again, stipulations within it that are talking to social media. Like I said, huge gray areas on how, because essentially a social platform is very much consent. So can you load an email list? So are you allowed to, let's say, grab your Facebook friend list, grab all the email addresses you have in there, stick them into a system and blast them? Essentially, you've got consent from these people to communicate with them. You look at the fact that you've had consent from those individuals, therefore they've consented to communicate. You've got electronic consent, you can communicate. I, under best practice, might advise against some of that because, again, let's just think outside the box. Forget about your business and yourself for a second. Think of yourself as a consumer. Think of yourself as a Facebooker, somebody who has an account. Do you want somebody you know, forget people you don't know, do you want somebody you know going into their Facebook list, grabbing their entire list, which includes you, and starting to market to you, when all you really wanted to do was see, like, you know, what they're up to in a weekend and the family and, like, whatever else, like the personal stuff? Like, remember, guys, strategically, like, you might look and go, oh, I've got all those addresses, I can grab them. I'm going to tell you, relationally, you want to be careful with that stuff. Pick and choose how you do it. Be safe. Keep yourself safe. Good question. So if someone emails me asking to view a home, we can send them a drip campaign or other CEMs over the next 6 months? Yes. If somebody inquires with you, hey, I want to know more, done. They've just created, now they've inquired with you electronically, let's remember that. They've just created implied consent with you over a 6-month period. So what do you want to do? Well, you want to track when you got it. You want to know when your 6 months expires. You want to track what you got. So far, it's just implied. So I might take that immediate opportunity to go right back to this person on my initial email back and pose the question of express consent. I mean, provide them maybe the information they're asking for or whatever it is, but as well at the same time, ask for express consent. Whether you do it by phone, whether you do it by email, however you do it, when you're replying to that inquiry, 6 months under implied, it's got that expiry, so take your first opportunity, ask for express. You no longer have an expiry. Just again, make sure to include your mandatory requirements. Sending flyers at the doors, we're talking paper flyers, totally different. That is flyering, that is paper, that has nothing to do with CEMs, commercial electronic messages. So again, paper has nothing to do with this, which also says paper is going to be very important to many of you as we move forward with CASL. Remember, we see over 150 emails per day. I believe I see a hell of a lot more, 50% of which is spam. There's a lot of electronic messaging going on. Now think about it. Most of us being very mobile, I'm looking at my email on my phone. I'm looking at my Facebook on my phone. I'm looking at my phone book on my phone, my phone calls on my phone. I'm going on the internet on my phone, my calendar's on my phone, like everything, mapping, my step counter, like you name it, it's all on my phone. At some point, I don't want like too much noise on my phone. It's just I got to turn it off. So when I turn it off, well, how are you going to get through to me? Now, I'm not really turning it off, but like putting it down. How are you going to get through to me? Calls, mail, in person. There's only so many ways, guys, to communicate with human beings. Let's go through that very quickly. You can call somebody. You can go see somebody. You can text somebody, and that's really all on you. All the other pieces, social, email, and paper. And now what they've just done is they've just created strict regulations on the email and the social. So remember, paper still has a ton of value for you guys. Good question. Is this just for email only? If they say no contact on a form, can I send a thank you card? Under the legislation, yes, because again, it's got nothing to do with that thank you card. Granted, the thank you card is pen and paper, not electronic. That said, if somebody said no contact, they might mean no contact whatsoever. So, if you're putting that on a form and they're filling something out, the no contact might be like no contact electronically or no contact generally. Be a little bit specific, because if somebody says like no contact at all and you still send something, they may or may not like it. One thing I will tell you, most of us, don't send thank you cards that often anymore with pen and paper. You ever got one recently, though? And when you did you almost feel obligated to like thank the person for sending it to you? It's kind of funny how we do that, but it's such a lost art. So there's ways to again use that pen and paper to make it work. But to the question, make sure you specify what kind of contact if it is on a form. If someone has their email address publicly displayed on their website, this would be an implied consent that I can use after July 1st, correct? No, incorrect. Again, to clarify that one, you cannot just scrape a website that has an email on it and use it. You must have consent. You need to ask people for consent. If under their email address it says, this email is publicly available to you, I know you're looking at it right now, and you can take it and do whatever the heck you want with it, well, then you're good. Now, they might say it in different words than that. The idea, again, being just because it's there doesn't mean you can go and grab it and use it. They haven't given you a consent. Make sure to pose the question. Your ads, good question there about your ads that are created and sent through social media, Facebook. They go to recipients you don't know. Yeah, I mean, you're putting it out there. It's going out. It's essentially an algorithm that Facebook is putting together. You've gone ahead and sponsored. Facebook is sending those out. We're going to, for the purpose of this, say that Facebook is a consented platform. So again, with that, I would tell you that, and as I said 18 times already today, it is gray area within social media. I would tell you because the feature and the service is there, and social media is putting it out there, you can't possibly know who you're talking to. That said, you want to keep yourself a little bit safe. Make sure to just include the mandatory requirements, because remember, those are important. So good questions here, guys. Lots of questions about the Facebook stuff, about boosting and sending mass general public groups. Like I said just a second ago, there's that same idea, right? It's exactly that. You've got a consented audience, and if you're doing the boosting and the sponsoring, that type of stuff, again, is going out. You're essentially allowed to do that because it's a consented audience. So again, sort of similar question there. If you're in the real estate industry and decide to send an email to real estate agents that have their emails posted on their website, that should be okay without express consent? No. Unless you've got consent, you can't just grab that email address. So if you've never communicated with this, let's go backwards sort of to the start of this thing for a second here. If you have ever communicated electronically prior to July 1st, 2014, you've got implied consent. Just go get express. If you have not communicated electronically with these people, you cannot just start adding them to a list and spamming them. You need to get consent first. That goes for websites, magazines, business cards, you name it. Somebody who provided an email address, is that consent for the next 6 months? Again, you've got consent depending on how they gave it to you, depending on what form it was in. If it was an inquiry or a business dealing, you're going to have consent. Just make sure you get express. In the KIT system, there's not a way we aren't storing. So somebody asked here, is there a way to include an attachment into our KIT system to show the business card with the note we wrote on it? No. We don't have a document storage tool within the system. Server loads and everything else is really the biggest reason to that. But the idea behind that being, me personally, I've got a big drawer full of these business cards. I've got a whole sort of filing cabinet that I've labeled this, and I've been doing this for years now, so mine is just piled up. The reality is, yeah, it's a shoebox full of business cards or whatever it be, but I've got my tracking, so if I've got to look it up. Now, one thing I will do within the KIT system is I will go into the activity tab for that particular contact's record, and I will add in the notes of what, when, why. So I'll put it there. And I might even say business card or open house sign-up form in the shoebox or in the filing cabinet, and therefore I know it'll go back and reference. So it's really your own way of kind of managing where and what, but I would tell you, use the KIT system, the activities tabs to track it, write your notes so you've got that date and that timestamp, and then keep the hard copy somewhere just so you've got it. Define expiry of 2 years or 6 months. Cool. And this is good stuff, guys, and for some of you we might be somewhat repetitive, but I think that the repetition is absolutely important. So let's look at that. Again, define expiry of 2 years or 6 months. That has to do with only implied, not express. Express is infinite, right? So let's go back to implied. Somebody inquires, we have 6 months. We do a business dealing, we have 2 years. So total stranger emails you, wants to know more about the property, you have 6 months to talk to them under implied consent. Make sure to ask for express almost as fast as you can. If you've done a deal with somebody from the date that expires, you've got 2 years. So you just had a client close, they're done, everything's finished. You now have 2 years to bombard this person under what's called implied. But again, at that point too, best practices, you should have asked for express a long time ago, just considering they're a client of yours. This is almost something I'd start to work into anything from a listing presentation to just sort of filling out those forms to, agency and whatever it is. Like have a little form there that says, you've granted express consent. Somebody just wrote, I get a lot of emails for dating. Well, I'll tell you, plenty of fish already got nailed, so I don't know where they're coming from. So I can't complain about anyone who's sending emails. No, it's not that you can't. So somebody says, so I can't complain about anyone who's sending emails. No, it's not that you can't complain. You can. Just make sure you realize that it's not just going to be you kind of doing it from like, a back room that nobody can see you and you're kind of throwing it out there, but you're hiding behind a rock. They're going to know exactly who you are. The governing body is going to know who you are. They're going to look into you. They're going to want to understand you before they start imposing these administrative, aka fines, on this person or these companies. So we've got one here. Okay, so again, this was just sort of the clarification of grabbing email addresses from the website there. Again, for you, who you are, who posed that question there, as going onto the website and what they had to answer on that, this is why I say to you guys, as you read through this legislation, if you decide you want to dig a little deeper on it, and I've done extensive reading, when I talk about this gray area, there is a lot of it. And when I talk about the fact that as each situation is unique, they're going to treat it unique, they are. They're going to be looking at this. They're going to be analyzing it. They're going to see if you are a spammer, if you've been in trouble in the past. They're going to look at what the history is. They can only deal with so much. And so if you find a way to grab those emails and include them, it's you who's taking a risk. Because even like the government says, it totally depends on the situation. It's totally dependent. So they're going to look at the whole backtrack of everything and decide whether or not you did this right or you did it wrong. And I want to tell you guys, separate note but similar, the DNCL do not call list. As I was doing more research on this CASL legislation, I found a lot of people who've been nailed within the do not call list. And when I tell you how blown away I was at how many real estate companies and salespeople have been nailed for it, I don't know if anybody on this phone's been nailed for do not call. If you have, then you know. If you haven't, and you're kind of going, no, I didn't even know anybody gets in trouble for that, I was blown away at how many people have gotten nailed for it and how much they've had to pay. I'm talking thousands of dollars. So when you look at gray area, you look at like breaking it down based on the scenario, it's really going to be that way. They're going to look at it and try to figure out what, why, where, when. Great question. Are we safe when kids are sending emails? Absolutely. We keep you safe. That is the goal. We made sure that our system will definitely keep you safe. Good question. So what if I get a phone call inquiry about a listing, and then I get their email for my, and use it for myself, pass it off to a partner, a team leader, or whoever to follow up? Is that implied consent? Well, here's the way it would go for me. Somebody calls up and says, hey, I want to know more about, 123 Andover Street. And I'm going to do my thing, digging who are you, what's your name, what are you looking for, and ask all those questions. And then I'm going to probably say something to you along the lines of, hey, I can definitely send you more information. In fact, what's the best email for you? And they're going to read off their email address because they want the info, and you're going to mark that down. And then you're going to naturally roll right into, so have I got express consent to email you? And they're going to say, yeah. And you're going to go, great. So forget the implied thing. You've just literally created express consent. And you want to take it a step further, you're going to be funneling that information to your team lead, to your partner, to whoever, tell that person on the other line, hey, I got your email. Yeah, I can get express consent. Yeah, great. I'm going to send you something. You may be hearing from myself and or someone on my team. And they're going to go, okay, cool, thank you. And that's that. Again, go back to your database, track it. Was on the call with this person at 2:15 in the afternoon on June 7th. They asked me to send some information. I asked them for express consent. They granted. I informed them that I was going to share that with my team or my partner. We will be in touch. They said, okay, wonderful. Check. You've prefaced the whole thing with these people. You haven't kept them in the dark about what your intentions are. Tell them, the same way I've said to many of you, I'm going to add you to my database. You are going to receive emails from me. If they become too much, please let me know, right? Tell me to stop. Tell me, Dave, you're pestering me. But if you don't tell me, all of you I have created express consent with. And therefore, it's up to you to unsubscribe. Just preface it. Just let people know what your intentions are. Good question. Texting. Sending a text message. Would that be a CEM? Yes, it is. No. And I see your next one said, never mind. No. That was a great question. Texting is a CEM. But it's good to bring that one up, even if you're laughing, going, obviously it's electronic. Go beyond that. And again, the legislation talks about this. Am I really expected to put my first name, my last name, my mailing address, and an unsubscribe feature in a text message? No, I'm not going to do that. So what are they looking at when it comes to text messaging? Go back to these botnet companies. Go back to these phishing companies, these big spammers. These companies that are literally grabbing us out of nowhere. Like if you ever get a text message talking about whatever, and you're going like, I never subscribed to this, I don't know who this is, and it's literally like a mass text, that right there. In fact, I get them from my service provider all the time. My service provider was just up on one of those screens back there. My service provider got nailed. It's got nothing to do with me, but it's funny because I look at my text message and I go, that's exactly what it's all about. So a text message definitely falls under the legislation. The text message becomes, again, part of that gray area of like, are you kidding? There's no way I'm including all that information. And therefore, you are allowed to do it, but just, again, be careful. I don't personally believe, just from my experience in your industry over the past dozen years, that any of you out there have these massive text messaging systems in place. If your CRM can send text, that's okay. But again, let's think most of those people are contacts of yours, therefore you have consent. To clarify, if we send an email for consent and receive consent, we have another 6 months to continue to email them. Good question, and let's clarify that. If you have ever communicated electronically, then yes, you can send the email asking for consent. If you send that email asking for consent, you are going to tell them why you want consent, and you're going to be specific on the fact that you want to express consent. If they grant you consent, there is no expiry date. So forget about the 6-month idea now. They've now given you express consent. As long as your messaging includes the requirements, including unsubscribe, then it's up to them from now on. So again, you send an email to somebody asking for consent. They come back and say yes. You're saying, do I only have 6 months? No. You got all sorts of time. You've, in fact, gone back and asked for express. They've granted it. You've got infinite amount of time to email. It's now just up to them to sit back and decide whether they want to unsubscribe at some point. Implied has the expiry. Express does not. Your goal with everybody, ask for express. Forget about implied. The only reason implied really matters is that random stranger who asked you about the property for those few minutes or few days or few weeks or months, you've got implied. But like I said, best practice, immediately go back for express. Okay, so question to that, somebody's asking, in the KIT system, have we got any verbiage that will actually allow you to send it off to somebody who you do have implied consent for to ask for express? We haven't physically put any verbiage around that. I'll look into that to see it. Typically speaking, your newsletter is going to be newsletter information, but it's a great question. I'm going to look into that and see if we can create one of the articles even get that up there very quickly that just says, hey, you're on my list. You've got implied, we've got implied consent. I'm seeking express, and we'll do that. But guys, I'm also gonna come back to this for a second. You guys know how I always push the relationship thing. Use this opportunity right now to call everybody you know. Instead of whatever, sitting back and doing it through an email, which it's easy, it's quick, or whatever. Use the opportunity to pick up the phone and call somebody. Hey, it's me. Listen, anti-spam legislation kicks in July 1st. I got your email here. I just want to ask, if I got to express consent, you okay with me emailing you? Yeah, sure, no problem. Wonderful. Thank you so much. If you ever want to, you can unsubscribe anytime. Now, we're getting our express consent. We're doing it verbally, so we're taking the opportunity to make a touch point with this person. We're then going to go back to our database, and in the Loop CRM, you're going to go to your Activities tab. You're going to write a little note about the phone call you made. You're going to write a little note about the fact that you got Express. You're going to go to their e-info tab and track that you got Express. Then you're going to take that person, schedule them ahead in your calendar 3-4 months, and then call them again. Why? Well, at that time, you'll figure out another reason to touch base. But this is where we're creating predictable days with income-producing activities, right? Tracking notes, managing relationships, using your calendar. Go one step further. Use this as an excuse to pick up the phone. You don't know what to say usually? Here it is. I want your express consent. But I'll look into seeing about what kids can do to add an article there. Okay. I receive a phone call, listing inquiry, and I, the admin, get their email for my team leader to follow up with. Is that implied consent? Yeah, that's essentially implied consent. But again, if you're on that phone call, literally, it's like it's a phone. Somebody's calling you. Hey, I don't know, Tom. It's me, David. I just had a question about your house out in whatever 123 Anywhere Street. Can you tell me more? Yeah, absolutely. We can share all sorts of information. In fact, why don't I get somebody to get back in touch with you? I'll have so-and-so call you. And as well, I'd like to send you some follow-up from myself, possibly on behalf of the team. So-and-so who's going to call you is probably going to want to send some email as well. What's the best address you got there? David@kidspack.com. Wonderful. Dave, one last way. Have we got your express consent to be able to email you just to make sure, you're okay with us emailing you? Oh, yeah, no problem. Please send it over. Okay, great. I'm also going to be sending this along to so-and-so who's going to be in touch with you, and I'm going to let them know that we've got express consent, so you can expect to hear from so-and-so at blah, blah, blah.com. So again, because you're doing this verbally, you've completely got all opportunity in the world to pose that question, and I think it's a great time to do it, because now what you've just done, let's say they're asking you about a listing, but they don't actually purchase the home or they don't do any business with you. Well, you took the opportunity while you're on the phone with them to ask for express consent. So you've essentially just added another person to your database. And you're allowed to do it. You got consent. Yeah, you can phone anybody you want. Can you phone a past acquaintance, a past coworker outside of real estate to ask and receive express consent? Guys, let's be clear. CASL does not have is not only targeted towards realtors. This is any business, any individual who lives within our borders. So you're in a past life you're in another business, and now you're selling real estate. Can you go back to the people you knew from a past life, call them up, and ask for consent? Absolutely, and in fact, I would encourage it. Call the people. Hey, it's me, Dave. Listen, I just wanted to let you know, I hope all's well. I'm actually in real estate now. I'm working with such and such. You know me. You like me. I think you like me. You trust me. If you need anything, I'm here for you. If you want to share it with anybody, let them know as well. By the way, I'd love to add you to my list. I want to send you something. What's your best email? And again, going through that, what's your best email? Great. Have I got your express consent? So I'd say to you guys, by all means, and especially in this real estate world, those people that know you, like you, trust you, if you don't have everybody you know on a contact list, what are you doing? Don't stop what you're doing right now. Let's stick with this thing for a few more minutes. But when we're done, go and build that list. Do you think this type of legislation will extend to paper marketing? There is nothing in the works right now. I think that, no, I don't think it will. I have not heard of anything that's going to happen with that regard with paper marketing. I think that paper, as useful and as powerful as it is, there's obviously been a stigma around paper over the past probably 5, 6 years, maybe even 8 years, since sort of the social media world became so big and powerful as it is. People believe that, oh, I don't need to send paper anymore because I've got online, I got digital, it might be cheaper. And again, in a totally separate webinar, we're going to cover this stuff. And check out Mindshare 101 for the videos, because I did a video where I ranted about what the gurus, the online gurus, have told me about. And these things are like 45 to 90 seconds long. They're not going to drive you nuts. The idea there, though, is we went through what kind of dollars you got to spend on social media marketing. It is ridiculously, ridiculously expensive. And that's before you do any other marketing. So again, the use of paper with email, with social, that's going to give you the most powerful strategic option you have for your business. Guys, this session is recorded. Now, I've sort of stopped the recording somewhere halfway through this Q&A just because the Q&A is taking a little bit more time, which is good. Ask them all. But that being said, the presentation itself has been recorded. I'll play it back after and make sure that it actually recorded properly. As soon as I can, we're going to get that up on YouTube, again, at Mindshare 101, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're going to get that up on YouTube for you so you can play it back. All the links are on that second last slide that I've got, so you can have a look at those and do some good reading. Also, for all you KITS members on the line, we're going to be posting it on your Loop homepage. Yes. Once we receive express consent to market to prospects, can we market to them forever until they unsubscribe? Yes. As long as you've got express consent and you've done it all the right way and you've got all your mandatory requirements, exactly. You can do it till the cows come home. In regards to the do not call list, is this something that should be researched prior to sending consent emails? Well, there's a great, and I'd say probably loaded question. I believe, you want to be sure. A lot of this, again, remember this, guys. If you happen to have an email address from somebody, I'm going to imagine at some point you probably spoke to them somewhere. Hopefully, maybe you've got a phone number. Much the same if you are going to call them and you've got them as a contact record, you're probably not really subject to the do not call list. If for some reason you've got an email, you got a phone number, this is like a total open house inquiry, they just gave you 2 pieces of info, and you want to connect back with them, I'm going to say again, they walked into your open house. They gave you information. They've kind of sort of said to you, yeah, it's okay to connect with me. So, I mean, best practice, you could check the do not call list, but don't create a mountain for yourself in this one. Like don't make it too difficult. Again, you're going to use certain ways to communicate with people. It's all dependent. Yeah, I love that. What a question. I've been spammed on text, and I get it all the time. I can't stand it. How to unsubscribe for it, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm going to tell you something. That right there, those guys, the guys with the red writing and the white letter, or the red letters or the white whatever, that service provider for phones that I showed before, they're my service provider. I get texts, a few times a month, and I'm looking going, I've never subscribed to this stuff. I don't have a proper answer for you on that one. I'm sorry. It's actually something I'm probably going to dig deeper into my own. Guys, the onus is always going to be on the recipient to go and, again, do the ratting out. How much time have you got in a day? Do you really want to spend time on this stuff? I mean, again, if it gets you to that point where you do, well, you know where to go. And then, again, you go to the government site and you do the reporting. My belief, though, is it's like when I look at these text messages that I receive and I think to myself, well, yeah, I'd like to, go and deal with this and not have it anymore. I don't know. I guess the first person I'd call is probably my service provider and say, take me off that list. And in fact, I guess thinking that one through, that's probably my first step. I just, again, from a time perspective, I haven't got the time to do it. So totally prerogative on whether or not you want to take that action. But I might say the first action there, call your service provider and say, look, I've been on this list. I don't want to be on this list. Take me off of it. How do I do that? And if you do that, I'd love for you to share with me what your experience is. Okay, guys. Are there any more? There we go. Cool. Apparently, that service provider I've just been messaging actually has an unsubscribe feature. And while we say that, I'm actually going to backtrack some text message right now. And thank you for bringing that up. You know who you are. Hold on a second here. Let's see. There we go. You know what? They've done that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. They actually do. They've got at the bottom of the text message, update profile, contact us, or unsubscribe at, and they give a link. So they've in fact given a unsubscribe feature to that. And this one's from my service provider about enjoy 2 Big Mac Quarter Pounders with cheese. Another one they sent me was for Netflix. So, I mean, there's a lot of different spamming that they're doing, and they've essentially said to me, like, you're part of our client base. We're going to send this stuff to you. It's up to you, and if you want to subscribe, here it is. So they've really covered their butts. They've given me an ability to unsubscribe. You got to love the way the service providers work there. Wonderful. Are there any more questions before we sign off here? Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time, everyone. Have yourselves an awesome 2017. If you need anything at all, you know how to get a hold of us. And remember, build mindshare.